One of my very favorite editions of Hawkeyes Live each and every year. We get together with Levi Stevenson and we set up Cy Hawk. Of course, we do it the week of the game, but we also do an off-season summer primer, and we kick off our opponents preview series here, and appropriately so, with a Cy Hawk edition. And with this 12-team college football playoff on the horizon, dare I say that this may have significance past the state border, even more so than it has in the past. We will dive into it here at Hawkeyes Live, right here at the Voice of College Football. Of course, right next to me, the guy that makes it work now for 150 consecutive shows, Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Again, Levi Stevenson, wide right, natty light. I never know how to spell right or light when I put that together, but I believe we got it straight. But we appreciate Levi being here from SB Nation. Guys, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm wondering why we're wasting the 150th show on Levi Stevenson Foundation. I'm just kidding. It's
fair
all
enough.
love.
Fair enough.
Fair
enough. I did come on to an Iowa Hawkeyes show.
It's all love, but I'm glad we're at least to the point where it's somewhat reasonable to start talking about opponents. As I've said to Mark a number of times in the last couple of weeks, Levi, it's next month we've got conference media days. So when you say it like that, it's like, wow, the season's right around the corner. This is a really intriguing Iowa State team again. I think I've got a number of questions for Levi as it relates to staff, because I'm intrigued by the departure of a former Big Ten quarterback and Nate Shieldhouse, who departed for the NFL. That's a storyline for the Cyclones, but they got a lot of really talented guys coming back. I'm a huge fan of Abu Sama. I had some Hawkeye fans,
absolutely.
I had some Hawkeye fans rip me last year because I made the comment during the season that Abu Sama was without question the best running back in the state of Iowa. And people didn't like that because there was all this hype around Caleb Johnson and, people like Jazz Patterson. He looked pretty good against Iowa State. But I mean, those guys, if you're an objective observer, I don't think there's any question Abu Sama looked the part over everybody else. And I think Iowa's got a chance of having maybe the better running back room. That's a topic we could discuss. I think depth-wise, I was surprised they were able to hold on to the number of guys they did. But no, it's an intriguing team and intriguing matchup to preview, Mark.
Yeah. Chris Kleiman would agree with you.
Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely. Levi, as we talked about a little bit before we started to record here, I did a bit of a deeper dive on Iowa State this week because I've got my Big 12 power rankings. And Rocco Becht, it would be a surprise to many people across the nation that he broke Brock Purdy's records pretty much across the board for a single season. He was the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, Newcomer of the Year.
Offensive Newcomer of the Year,
Yes. The running back that Corey just ran down. And, of course, the some of the top pass catchers in the league are back, 9 starters back on defense. This team is, dare I say, loaded.
It's kind of funny. It's 19 of 22 starters are coming back, and I think there's only, maybe 5 or 6 of them that are seniors. Most of them are like returning sophomores and juniors, so there's still even lots more growth to happen there. And there might be a few more on the offensive line, but outside of Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll, like you said, Rocco is a redshirt sophomore. Abu Sama's a true sophomore. Carson Hansen's a true sophomore. They've got a gaggle of other people all across that are sophomores and juniors. And this is a team that it's hard not to be excited about this one. Just because like you said, Rocco broke a lot of freshman passing records, a lot of Brock Purdy's. And frankly, probably those numbers could have been a lot better because I would argue they really didn't trust him to be a throw first guy. I don't think they really started trusting him until probably the end of September, to really let him go and really let him throw it down the field. So that's part of that's just him being a redshirt freshman and just trying to get him up to speed and all that. So I don't blame them for holding him back a little bit for the first month or so, but if we knew what Rocco could be or whatever, and just let him go right from the beginning of the season, it'd be interesting to see what his numbers could look like. And frankly, what Iowa State's record might've looked like. Because especially like that Ohio game, especially just kind of stands out on that record now. Is like, damn, we that shouldn't have happened. That even if Rocco wasn't playing well, that loss obviously should never happen for a Big 12 school. But you could even make the case like Iowa probably could have been a win had they opened up Rocco more, stuff like that. So it's really hard not to be excited about it. The defense has always been good under John Haycock and will continue to be good. I have no reason to believe that will change. But there's talent all over the skill positions on this team. And I know we'll get into it more. I know Corey had questions about staff and things like that, but there's a very high ceiling on this offense for sure.
Yeah, and I'm tight end is an intriguing position to talk about as well. And you talk about some of the parallels with these two programs, and we do this every year. We do this preview. We'll have Levi on, I'm sure, game week again. But I'm intrigued by running back. I'm intrigued by tight end. And, of course, we're not even talking about some of the changes with the Iowa offense. I'm sure that Iowa State fans will find something else to jeer at now that Brian Ferentz has moved on. But it won't be that.
Probably just whoever's calling plays now, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it'll be that's the second game of the season, too. So it'll be the first test. Because of when this game is positioned, it'll be the first test for new OC Tim Lester. But I do think we're going to see somewhat of a different attack as it relates to wideouts, as Iowa desperately needs. But tell us a little bit about the wide receivers, and then what's his face, a young tight end whose name escapes me.
Ben Bramer. Probably. I'm assuming you're talking about Ben Bramer.
Is it Bramer? I would say Bramer.
Yeah, it's Bramer. Yeah. Yeah. So tight end specifically has been a very significant position of strength, obviously, for Iowa State, basically the entire Matt Campbell era. But I would argue there's probably just as much depth in this room as there ever has been. Ben Bramer was, for sure, he was on the newcomer team. I think he was a first team All Big 12 tight end last year. True like vertical threat, like a true modern tight end, vertical threat down the field. If you want to make weird NFL comparisons, a Travis Kelce type thing where you're really running him and trying to get him open downfield, 15, 20 yards downfield even. I know in his first game against in the opener against UNI, he caught like a 40-yard over the shoulder seam route, stuff like that. Steve Klotz is the classic F back, whatever you want to call him, the blocking tight end that Iowa State has used pretty consistently. It used to be Sam Seenbuckner. It was Dylan Sainer for a while. Now it's Steve Klotz. He's widely considered to be one of the best like run blockers in the country, just out of that F back type position. And you've got a number of pass catchers here too. Gabe Burkle out of Cedar Rapids Prairie. Is a guy that came on last year, showed up really nicely. Andrew Keller was a nice guy out of Wisconsin that I know Wisconsin themselves went after quite a bit. Nice receiving target there. The one I'm really curious to see, because he was a big time prospect, was Cooper Alexander. He's a true freshman coming in out of Oklahoma, and he was a big Oklahoma target for a long time. And Iowa State stole him right off from Oklahoma's grasp. And I think that's a guy that, I mean, if you watch his tape, he looks a lot like Ben Bramer, big time vertical threat. I think this is a group, especially now that Taylor Mauser, the tight ends coach, is the offensive coordinator. I would expect Ben Bramer to have a very big season. I know, I would like first team All Big 12, maybe potentially even pushing for some All-American teams, stuff like that. I mean, Ben Bramer is the standout here, but that whole group, you'll see a lot of that group on the field this season. I'm really curious to see what Cooper Alexander looks like, because I think if they can get him going, alongside Ben Bramer and get them both on the field at the same time, that would be an absolute nightmare to try to scheme against.
Now
Bramer's so good he could possibly even play for Iowa.
you do realize that when you say like those are high expectations for a young tight end. You realize that, right?
I 100%, but his based on his last season, I have no reason to project anything less than that. I mean, his freshman season was outstanding. And teams had a very big problem matching up with him, especially on seam routes and things like that, where he could get vertical against a linebacker or something like that. I mean, teams had lots and lots of trouble covering Ben Bramer.
Let me respond to Eric in the chat. He says, Abu Sama averaged 3 yards a carry versus Iowa. Iowa's a run by committee team. Give Johnson or Williams, even Patterson, the bulk of the carries. I'll take them over Sama. I don't agree with that.
I don't like the premise of that answer.
Well, let me defend it. Let me defend Iowa State for you because I know Eric's a Hawkeye fan. First of all, premise, yeah, exactly. The context is very important. You said it in your answer. You're going up against one of the best run defenses in the country, first of all. Also, it was Abu Sama's, second game?
Yeah, and he wasn't even like the consensus starter at that point.
And he was a marked man based on what he did the week prior against you and I. And we don't know. We're just speculating as it relates to what Jazz Patterson, Caleb Johnson, or LaShawn Williams would do if they were all alone. Keep in mind, all those guys have struggled with injury. So, anyways, I would
this way. Put it the way I would say it. Put it this way: is if Iowa had Abu Sama, he would be the starter, no question.
I mean, I think they would still run the other guys.
Well, they would still run. I mean, even Iowa State runs him in a committee. Like, every college football team does running back by committee now. That's like the bell cow back. Like, even Breece Hall was part of a committee. He still got a lot of carries, but him and Breece Hall and Dave Montgomery still part of a committee. It's the bell cow back getting 35 or 40 carries, like, the old Wisconsin back. So that's not really a thing anymore. But like he would be, I would venture to say that if Abu Sama was a Hawkeye, but if he was, he would lead the team in carry. He would get the majority of the work, or he would get the most work out of anybody.
And Iowa State did lose another guy who you're going to be able to. Who's the kid who transferred to Charlotte that was getting some play early?
Oh, Cartavius Norton.
Norton left. Did they lose another guy from that room?
Well, Eli Sanders, yeah. Eli Sanders and Cartavius Norton were kind of the projected starters going into the season, and they did start the first couple games. Those two guys got the most of the carries, but then obviously as the year went on, Abu Sama. as the year went on, obviously Abu Sama stood out and then really took the job on his own throughout the end of the season. And at that point, and Carson Hansen has solidified himself as the backup. At that point, it became just an issue of these guys want to carry the football. They want snaps in their college careers, and I don't blame them for leaving because they were buried on the depth chart at this point.
Mark, I have to slip out for just a second. I'll be right back.
Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. We talk Hawkeyes every Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. And the deal is that we start an opponent series every summer. And why not lead off with Cy Hawk? And I'll start this conversation because I alluded to it right out of the gate, Levi.
Yeah.
That these two fan bases can reasonably talk about college football playoff. Of course, it's not 4, it's 12 now. So that just completely changes the dynamic across the board. But their paths are most likely different in that, yes, the Big Ten may, when I say should, it remains to be seen on the field, but just based on the perception of the league and the way things should carry out with a number of powerhouse type teams, should get more spots in the Big 12. But
well, I would guess you could probably bank on the Big Ten getting at least 3, maybe 4 in a lot of years. And Big 12 will get guaranteed 1, probably 2.
Yes,
in a lot
totally
of years.
Agree with both of those statements. It would have been a difficult situation last year with Oklahoma State at 9-4,
right,
getting trucked in a Big 12 championship game. But most years I would expect 2. So no one considers Iowa to be a contender for the Big Ten championship, a serious contender. But Iowa State could win the Big 12. I know that there's a ton of teams in the mix, and of course Utah is the big brand coming in. But Iowa State, both of these teams can reasonably talk about playoff expectations.
Yeah, and it's two different equations that kind of come out to the same answer in that, like, in a lot of years, both Iowa and Iowa State should have the ability to compete for one of the last couple spots in from their respective conferences. Could Iowa compete for a Big Ten title? Sure. You'd have to get some help from Ohio State and Michigan and Oregon and Washington not being competitive, but there's a path there. But for the most part, Iowa can get in to a playoff as maybe the 3rd or the 4th team or something like that. They can compete for that 4th spot a lot of years. And Iowa State, if you're thinking that the Big 12 and the Big 12 obviously has one guaranteed spot. And you think most years they'll probably have a second team. Getting into the conference championship game at 10 wins, which I already know what comment's coming now, but getting into the conference championship game at even 9 good wins or 10 wins or something like that gives you a shot to sneak in as that second Big 12 team.
Iowa State
doesn't matter what your record is.
Real quick, Iowa State's not getting in with Iowa State is not getting in with 9 wins and no Big 12 championship.
It would be tough. It would depend on what the schedule looks like, but probably not. You're correct.
I will say this: you're absolutely right. I think both these teams have a fair shot at making a push for a top 15 spot. I think I said earlier today in a show that if you're entering November, fringe top 25, again without knowing exactly what the records look like, you're thinking, hey, if we can sweep November, we got a chance at eking our way in there. Now a championship helps you, but the situation with the Big Ten is, we could talk forever about this, Mark, and I know you have, but the dynamic with the SEC and the Big Ten right now are so unique because, as it relates to Big Ten championships, I feel even less optimistic than Levi makes me out to be, because I don't think Iowa has any chance of winning a Big Ten championship for the foreseeable future. I can't envision.
I was trying to be nice. I wasn't trying to pile on, but yeah, I would probably generally agree with you that now that you have Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, USC, and Washington that are probably competing for those 2 spots.
Penn State.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about. Yeah, Penn State would be another one. You've got half a dozen programs that are probably perennially going to have a better shot at winning.
And keep in mind, Iowa, although they've made 2 of the last 3 Big Ten title games, have gotten throttled in both. And that was with divisions where you have 2 of the top 3 powers in the conference not able to compete, and Iowa still got pwned.
Right, so, that's part of it too, is they won't have the Big Ten West to help get them some extra wins to get into the title game. So that'll be tough.
However, I do think the schedule makes out, especially this year. It's still a difficult schedule. I want to make that very clear. It is a difficult schedule, but it is as favorable as you could hope for. Mark, you and I have talked about it. You add to Iowa's schedule, you avoid Michigan, you avoid Penn State, you get UCLA, who I think made one of the stranger head coaching hires of this past offseason, and frankly of recent off seasons that I can remember, and then Washington, who's coming off a high but lost everything. So if you're talking about adding 2 of the 4 West Coast teams, you like those 2 teams. I think Maryland's an interesting one late in November. It would have been a crossover game prior. That's an interesting game. But boy, that game in September against Iowa State could have some playoff implications. It's going to, one of those 2 teams is going to pay the price of losing that game.
I would think losing that game could probably, depending on, honestly, probably more depending on what Iowa State does, that could theoretically just knock somebody out entirely.
And most likely that's Iowa.
Right. That's what I'm saying, is if Iowa loses that game, they're probably done as far as a playoff. Unless they can make a big run and, upset some people or whatever. But, generally speaking, I think if you lose to Iowa State, and then you can probably count on a couple Big Ten losses, or at minimum, I would say that at that point, you might be getting closer on the outside looking in. Iowa State would probably have a better shot at making that up and getting, like I said, getting to a conference title game and maybe winning it or something like that. But
to Corey's point, Ohio State's probably the best team in the league. They're considered that right now. After that, the next 4, Iowa doesn't play any of them. Michigan, Penn State, USC, Oregon, none of them on the schedule.
Yeah.
Now, at Maryland, again, this is all relative, right? At Maryland's difficult. Home against Wisconsin is still difficult. I don't know what to make of the Badgers. Have not. That's a team that I'll be anxious to dive into before I start doing some schedule previews. But those 2 teams, obviously very dangerous. Iowa State's a tough game. They get that game in Kinnick, and that's the advantage. 2 of those 3 games are at home. And, then
I just want to make it known that Kirk Ferentz has not beaten Iowa State at Kinnick this decade. So
this decade? Well, they didn't play in 2020.
I'm sorry. I didn't make the rules. I'm just saying in the 2020s, Kirk Ferentz has not beaten Iowa State in Kinnick.
That is the best Levi quote of all time, Mark.
Yes.
Write that one down. Write that
Instead of saying Iowa State won the last time they went to Kinnick,
They have not beaten Iowa State at Kinnick since 2018.
And
so
guess what I could also say? Guess what I could also say, Levi? I could say, I'm going to say something you're not expecting. Iowa State has not beaten Iowa at Kinnick this decade. I could also say that. It may not be a completely logical statement, but I have some.
Are you implying that Iowa lost the game in 2022?
Did you watch the game?
I did. It was terrible.
Did you watch it?
It was a nightmare.
It was terrible. But when you listen, Arlen Bruce, okay, that's all I have to say. Arlen Bruce slips with no one around him, and it would have been a touchdown. And then you trot out the lesser of the two kickers. Had Drew Stevens kicked that field goal, even in the rain, we're probably headed to overtime. You can go down the list. I'm not the type of guy that likes to say, well, this team lost more than this team won it, but it was an ugly, ugly game. Mark, that was one of that season. We talk about these offenses of Iowa's last 3 seasons, but that 22 season had to have been the worst. Now they finished 8-5, right? They finished 8-5.
Hashtag beat Ted West.
yes.
Who'd they beat in the bowl game? Can you
Kentucky.
believe I'm asking you this, Mark?
Kentucky, they had 2 pick sixes.
That's right. Okay, but my point is,
scored 3 touchdowns.
Some of the most
basically
despicable offensive performances I've ever witnessed. And I go back to the game against Iowa.
Nate Stanley still there?
No, that was a Spencer Petras few years.
Yes.
No, you're talking that game against Iowa State, horrid. You talk about that game against Wisconsin where Graham Mertz looked like Levi and dreads. All right. I mean, talk about
I don't know what that means.
horrid performance.
Oh,
it's a bad look, apparently, Levi.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mark. He understands my language. Horrid performance by Graham Mertz. And he goes to Florida and looks like a Heisman candidate. So my point is, I have not seen some of the worst football in my life. And I was at, you know what, the game I was actually, I don't think I went to one game that year. I made it over for the Nevada game. We all know what happened. That game went into the wee hours of the morning. And what did Iowa do? Won 27-0 and never put a backup quarterback into the game. Like, it was just the cherry on top of it's not even, it's ignorance, it's stupidity, it's benevolence in a sense. But anyways, can we not talk about 2022? That was unbelievable. And then you lose to Nebraska and blow your chance of backing your way into the
That's the most embarrassing part of all this.
It was pretty embarrassing, yes. Rick wants to know if you're a fan of Angel Reese.
I don't really have an opinion on Angel Reese.
Okay.
She is a basketball player.
How do you, as an Iowa State fan, feel about Caitlin Clark? Do you just not care?
So
I know a lot of Iowa. Real quick, I know a lot of Iowa.
Am I allowed to not care?
Yeah,
no,
you're allowed to not care.
So I would say, generally speaking, here's where I'm at. I respect her talent as a basketball player. Would I want to play there's her talent as a basketball player. There's what I see on the floor as far as her constantly complaining to officials and stuff like that. It's just mind numbing to me. Have you watched the NBA this century? The NBA or the WNBA?
The NBA.
The
NBA? You enjoy the NBA?
I don't know. Not really.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
I've watched the last full NBA game I've watched from start to finish was the Warriors Thunder game in 2016 or whatever, when Steph Curry hit 14 threes. That was the last NBA game I watched.
You don't watch the NBA. Okay.
No, I don't. For a myriad of reasons, and most of them related to James Harden. But anyways, because I can't stand him playing. But anyway, so Caitlin Clark, her behavior on court drives me nuts or whatever. I respect her talent as probably the best women's college basketball player of all time. I respect that. I'm also kind of very, very sick of being oversaturated with all the Caitlin Clark everything all the time.
Not her fault, by the way.
No, it's not her fault, but I can still be annoyed by it.
Sure.
And just the same way, like when Trae Young was at Oklahoma and it was just all Trae Young all the time, whatever. You guys may have been insulated from that a little bit being in the Big Ten, but for us in the Big 12, every single game had, even if you weren't playing Oklahoma, had a ticker on the bottom that said how many points Trae Young had that night. It was like, I'm so tired of hearing about this. And especially with Caitlin Clark, and I live over in Eastern Iowa, I am very tired of hearing her name. I just want to move on and recognize that there are other good women's basketball players.
Yeah. One being Audie Crooks, pretty talented.
One being Audie Crooks,
Very
and
talented.
most of the rest of Iowa State's women's basketball roster,
Yeah.
which is also very good.
So I guess we went off on this tangent, Mark.
Yeah. So, anyways, back to Iowa State football.
The bottom line is both these teams have a chance to make the playoff, and if I'm Iowa, I'm looking at this and saying we got to get to 10 wins. And reasonably speaking, I think what Levi said earlier is fair. You lose to Iowa State, your chances of getting to 10 wins drop dramatically, because I think it's first of all, you got to assume that they go to Ohio State and lose. But after that, there are difficult games, but they're all winnable. However, are you going to bank on Iowa winning all 8 of them? I'm certainly not. And they may not win 7 of them, but if you want a reasonable chance to make the playoff, I do think Iowa State is as close to a must-win for a game that early as you can get. And I'll be curious to see what the offense. Tell us a little bit about what you expect the offensive attack to look like, Levi, and how will it look different with Nate Shieldhouse taking the job with the Rams?
So there's a kind of a couple little parts to this. So generally speaking, even when Nate Shieldhouse was calling plays, it still looked fairly similar to what Tom Manning. I mean, just like with Kirk Ferentz, no matter who's calling plays for Kirk Ferentz, you're running Kirk Ferentz's offense. In general, Matt Campbell's offenses all look fairly similar. They may do certain different things in different situations, but they're still going to use lots of pre-snap motion. They're going to use the tight ends, and there are multiple tight ends in the passing game. They'll use an F-back / tight end in the running game. They'll run some underneath stuff to then open it up further downfield. They'll do a lot of the same type of stuff. Everything that I'm hearing in the off season indicates that with Taylor Mauser calling plays, and just given the personnel they have with Rocco and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, and having all these really good receivers and a couple very good vertical tight ends, that everything I'm hearing is they're trying to throw the ball downfield push the ball downfield more, be a more vertical offense versus less bubble screens and underneath routes and things like that, which they did a lot of in 22 and 23, partially because 22, because Hunter Deckers could not reliably throw football to anything 10 yards downfield. But then Rocco just being really young last year, and obviously with young quarterbacks, you typically tend to keep them closer to the line of scrimmage and all that. Everything I'm hearing is that the emphasis will be to push the ball farther downfield and to try to test teams deep, because they have the weapons downfield to do something like that. We kind of thought that was going to be the case in 22 with Hunter Deckers. Obviously, that did not happen really. But that's what I'm hearing, and that makes sense to me. That's like, if I hadn't heard anything, that would be what I would think they would do, would be to try to be more vertical offense going forward. But in the end, it's probably still going to look somewhat similar to previous Matt Campbell offenses.
So, Mark, a couple of years ago, we had a show. Was that 2 or 3 years ago? We had a show with Levi. I believe it was leading up to the 2021 Iowa win in Kinnick, or in Jack Trice. And I remember Levi running through, and we've joked about that since then, Mark. But you remember he was giving the nod to Iowa State at linebacker. He was giving the nod to Iowa State at DB. He was giving every.
I still stand by that.
He stands by. He even gave him the nod, I think, at tight end. Didn't he say they had a better tight end room? And that was.
Oh man, that 2021 Iowa State tight end room was.
It was good. I get
really
it.
Good.
So was Iowa's.
Yeah, sure.
So
they both have good tight end rooms every year now. I mean,
we don't have to, because I know we're already almost 5:15. I know we can't dive into this as deeply as we will in September, but I'm curious to know if off the top of your head, which positions would you say at this point and maybe you don't know Iowa well enough, but which positions would you estimate to be Iowa State having an edge over Iowa this fall?
I would say all the skill positions on offense. Quarterback, no question. Running back, probably. Receivers, definitely. Tight ends. I don't know Iowa's tight ends well enough, but just based on depth, I would say probably Iowa State. I'm sorry.
Hold on a second. I gotta get my blood pressure.
I'm looking Mark, at how they fit in the respective offenses and things like that. I call that a push.
Come on.
Even if you
got a second-year tight end in Ben Bramer,
Iowa's best receiving. He's one of the best. He was one of the best receiving tight ends in the
Iowa is returning. Iowa is returning a guy who's projected to be maybe a top 5 tight end in the country and a top 5 tight end in this coming draft. and you're telling me, plus everything that they have behind them, you're telling me.
I think Ben Bramer can be up there.
Well, he might be able to be up there, but like if you're gonna Mark,
I mean, I'm looking at the even. Okay, fine, whatever. You can have tight ends. I don't give a shit.
And if we're looking at, and if we're
I would say, I mean, I think I don't think there's any objective way to say that Iowa State is not better at quarterback, running back, and receiver. I don't think there's any way you can make an argument for Iowa
hold on,
at any of those positions.
Hold on. Let me just say this. There's no way on this earth I could argue Iowa has a better receiver room. I agree with you. Now, I hope Iowa's receiver room ends up performing really well, but I agree with you 100%. I do think there's an argument at running back. I'm not saying that they've got a better room, but I'm saying if we're talking about room versus top tier talent, because we're talking top tier talent, like I say, I give that to Iowa State every time with Abu Sama. I think Rocco Beck certainly would have the edge over Cade. With a healthy Cade and a guy in Brendan Sullivan who's got starting experience, I think they could make there's a claim. Like Rocco Beck is not some Heisman candidate. He has not done anything to deserve that level of admiration.
At least Rocco's played football games. Like, I mean, that's
Cade didn't take Michigan to the national semifinals. Come on. Like, yeah.
When he was at Michigan.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, okay. But I'm saying,
what I'm saying here is Cade played 3 games last year. I don't even know. Like not even a half a season. And he was terrible in all those games.
Like I said, well, he was hurt. Okay, he was
and he's still hurt. He's gonna be hurt.
Okay. Well, that's your hypothesis, but that doesn't mean you're correct.
We're in June, it's all hypotheses.
Okay. Well, anyways, the point is, Cade has a lot more on his resume than Rocco. Then let's just call him Baby Beck, because nobody would have known who that fool was if it wasn't for who his dad was. So he's got a much better track record.
Hold on now.
He does. He's got a much better resume, whether you want to attribute to the guys around him or not. He has a much better resume than Baby Beck. And I'm
better or longer.
He took him to the college football playoff.
Not Iowa. He didn't. He took Michigan there before he was.
He's still the same guy.
He's the quarterback. I mean, I'm not saying
a quarterback. He's one of the quarterbacks of all time. Yes.
Resume. So
he has a longer resume. You're absolutely correct.
He has a better resume.
I would not
a longer resume.
As a passer of the football, I would not agree that he has a better resume.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, if we're looking
maybe in terms of team success, yes, he has been to a playoff. Sure,
that's part of. Isn't that part of evaluating the quarterback?
Like, I actually don't think it is a good way to evaluate quarterbacks. There are lots of mediocre quarterbacks that have played for very good teams that have won a lot of games. Like JJ McCarthy, perfectly fine quarterback, but he's not. No one here is calling him a very top tier elite talent, right?
I
just won a national championship.
I agree to an extent, because Spencer Petras was a part of a couple of teams who are actually pretty good.
But he is terrible. And he's at Utah State now, Utah Valley. Like, I mean,
however, it's anybody that watched those games that was registering a obscure pulse would be able to recognize that that Iowa won a lot of those games, most of those games, in spite of Spencer, not because of Spencer. Right. You cannot say that about the games for Michigan. Cade was really good. Not saying he was elite, but I'm saying he was good, and he was certainly not. They did not win in spite of Cade. He was a game manager. He was what they wanted at that time.
The thing with Cade here is you made it. The one important thing in there is game manager. I would put Rocco beyond a game manager at this point based on what he did.
You're right.
So, and then the other part of that too is all that stuff with Cade happened before his injuries. We've seen that he has had debilitating injuries the last season and a half. And we saw last year he was totally ineffective because of those injuries. Maybe he's better now. I don't know. But right now, I have nothing to go on as far as Cade McNamara in a Hawkeye uniform, because what we saw last year was nothing. And from everything that I've heard is he's still like not healthy, or he's as healthy as he's gonna be, but it's not healthy. Like, I don't like that. It's hard for me to take a guy who has been a game manager at best his whole career and he's hurt, versus a young player that showed a lot of promise last year and played very, very well, broke freshman passing records of the best quarterback in Iowa State history, and has a loaded group of skill positions around him. It's really hard for me to look at Cade McNamara and say that guy might be ahead of Rocco. I just don't see it.
But that is not what I said. What I said was, if you're talking about the room, he has a guy
even then.
He's been a starter at the Big Ten level. I'm not saying Brendan Sullivan's in the second coming. I'm simply saying
Brendan Sullivan's the guy from Northwestern, right?
Yeah. He's got Big Ten starting experience. So
yeah,
I'm just saying, as a room, not many teams, whether it's high level experience, not many teams have 2 starting Power 4 conference players.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa has more Power 5 starts in the room than Iowa State does.
Iowa State, what does Iowa State? And don't say JJ Cole, because he's a guy who's proved absolutely nothing. What do they have behind Rocco Becht?
Well, I mean, it's JJ and then freshman. Yeah, I'm not like I said, Iowa has more experience in the room. I would take Rocco over both of your quarterbacks on the field. I mean, they're like, Rocco is clearly better than both of the Iowa's quarterbacks.
So my point here is,
now, if Rocco goes down, we got to see what's behind him. We don't know what's behind him because we didn't have to, because Iowa State quarterbacks have been extremely durable under Matt.
So there's my question, Levi. It depends on how we're evaluating the rooms, right?
Right. Yeah. If you're assuming quarterbacks will get injured,
if both quarterbacks get injured, if both top quarterbacks get injured, who has the better quarterback at that point? Iowa, without
probably
doubt.
Iowa.
I mean, that at least on paper, that's what you would say.
On paper, yeah. So we haven't seen really haven't seen anything of JJ Cole, and we haven't seen anything. God, what the hell's the name back up? Connor Moberly from Southeast Polk. He's obviously a true freshman, so we haven't seen anything of him. But I think it's one of those where, yes, if you're assuming that the quarterbacks will go down at some point, then both teams have major problems, because both backup quarterbacks are not people you would want in charge of a Power 5, Power 4 offense right now.
Not at Iowa, though.
What?
Not at Iowa. For a backup quarterback, if Brendan Sullivan does not win the job, he is a capable Big Ten backup quarterback. He's a 69% completion guy on 200 attempts playing in the Big Ten.
Yeah. A different system, different receivers, different coordinator.
I think he might win this job, by the way.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll look forward to playing him, but I think.
But I could.
I guess part of what I'm looking at here too is that, like I said, Iowa State's quarterbacks under Matt Campbell have been exceedingly durable, like basically no injuries, except for because Kyle Kemp was healthy all of 2017. He went down in the Iowa game. Then Brock Purdy took over and didn't not start until the end of his career. And now we're at Hunter, who played an entire season, was healthy the whole season. Then Rocco was healthy all of last season. Iowa State does a very good job of protecting its quarterbacks. Very good job. It's from injury. That's obviously not to say that he couldn't get injured, but generally speaking, Iowa State has had better luck with keeping both quarterbacks and running backs healthy.
So I'll give you I'll just, for sake of, I think it's closer than maybe you think, but I will give Iowa State the nod. All things said, I'll give them the nod at quarterback. I give them the nod at running back, or excuse me, at wide receiver. I think running back is also closer than maybe some people think because of depth, and that is a position where you typically need depth, right? I mean, you
Iowa, because Iowa goes through like 4 running backs a year.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've had an issue. Whether you want to argue about the artificial turf or not, I don't know. But
yeah, whether it's artificial turf or not, I mean, the artificial turf is still there. So if it's the turf's fault or not, it doesn't actually really matter. I mean, I guess I could be wrong, but I mean, most seasons Iowa ends up trotting out 3 or 4 running backs as a starter at some point. Yeah. So, and again, not that they can't get hurt, but Iowa State has also had done a very good job of keeping running backs healthy.
Hey, can we real quick? I love this. Can we put Hawkeye Howard's most recent comment up on the screen, Mark? Please. Levi needs to see. Can Levi please read this to everybody?
He needs to be in somewhere other people make.
He's saying
you're
not
a translator on that last sentence,
and you need to be living somewhere where other people make your decisions for you. I'm sorry. I have to look. Hawkeye Howard's a great guy. He's a great fan, but all things is a funny comment. But we love Levi. We love it.
I would only suggest, Levi, that you make a different decision on JJ McCarthy.
Funny story about JJ McCarthy. Do you know who his first offer was? Obviously, it's Matt Campbell, because I'm here on the show telling you about this. But Matt Campbell was JJ McCarthy's first college offer. Obviously, Would have been nice to have him. Went to Michigan, worked out good for him. Don't blame him. But like my point about JJ McCarthy is like very successful guy, won a national championship. Nobody's knocking JJ McCarthy. I was actually probably higher on JJ McCarthy going into the draft than a lot of people that I talk to. But you're not putting him in the same like talent category as like Caleb Williams or something like that. I mean, obviously JJ McCarthy's not there or whatever. He's good, not knocking him at all, but he's probably not in the same talent category as, you know, as like I said, or Caleb Williams or something like that.
So the drop off in terms of NFL evaluation of Caleb Williams versus JJ McCarthy is from the number 1 pick in the draft to the number 5 pick in the draft versus JJ McCarthy to Brock Purdy, the number 5 pick in the draft to the number 8 million pick in the draft, the very last guy.
Well,
so,
yeah, I mean, part of it is too. There are 2 different drafts with teams that have different needs and stuff like that. Whatever,
sure.
But anyways,
they also miss it. They also listen. A lot of teams also missed on Brock Purdy. A lot of teams,
all of them, sure. Every single one of them missed on Brock Purdy.
Yeah. Now, I do think we could have a discussion on that another day. I do think Brock is partially a system of what's in place there. I'm not taking everything.
That's a different argument for a different day.
Just be objective for a second and say, yes, the system helps him.
Everybody, that system would help everybody.
Yes, but he's not. He is where he is. Everybody is not there. He is there. So
but
if
he
goes somewhere else, he's
without
not
getting too far into the weeds here. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan's system is about as quarterback friendly as it gets. No doubt about it. Not going to hear any arguments from me. However, if you listen to coaches and teammates talk about him, like if you listen to Kyle Shanahan talk about him or any of his teammates, they're like, yeah, the system's good, but Brock's got it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. No, credit to them for seeing that and using their last draft pick on him.
I mean, to me, as far as I see, all I see is a symbiotic relationship where Brock Purdy is better because of the Niners and the Niners are better because of Brock Purdy, and they're going to be really good for a long time. And that's all that matters.
Assuming he stays healthy. Assuming he stays
healthy. Yeah. And that goes with anybody though. So but anyways, so, you know, like the running back room is an interesting one. Like you said, I think Iowa State has the better top end talent with Abu Sama. I think the depth with Iowa State is probably undervalued and underappreciated. Maybe someone unknown. Like Carson Hansen is a very solid player. I'm very excited to see what he does. I'm going to say this because he's a white running back that can catch passes, but he's kind of that Christian McCaffrey type where you can split him out and do things like that. You know, I'm stereotyping him obviously, but that truly is the kind of player he is where they can split him out. They can put him in the slot, whatever else. They can have him and Sama on the field at the same time. That's a guy that you feel that Iowa State fans feel very good about as a backup running back. There's a guy coming in, Dylan Lee. He's a freshman out of Arizona. His high school tape is about as good as I've seen. And if you've seen Breece Hall's high school tape, it's ridiculous. Dylan Lee's is every bit as good as Breece's is. Don't know if he's going to be as good as Breece, but the talent is that, and the tools are there for him to be the next heir apparent to the Cyclone running back legacy under Matt Campbell. So we'll see if he breaks through a little bit, but I mean, Abu Sama and Carson Hansen are about as good a 1-2 punch as you can ask for. Right now, especially certainly in the Big 12, and you know, and for a lot of college football, a lot of teams would really like to have those two as their 2 running backs.
Do we want to real quickly run through defense? So position wise, I can start, I guess. I know Iowa State. You know, I think the biggest loss without question is TJ Tampa.
Sure. Yep.
And so I would. You know, regardless, I would probably give Iowa the edge at DB. And it's interesting, Mark,
specifically at corner, I would. Safety, I would give it to Iowa State.
Well, I thought it was interesting that CBS ranked Iowa in their top 3 for DB rooms in the country. Mark, you sent that to me earlier today.
Are they looping safety and corner into the same with DB?
Yes,
they are. Okay.
In cash.
With corner, I would probably, like, if you're going to loop with corner in there, Iowa's better at corner just because Iowa State's young there.
Now, before you say any more, remember that Iowa returned Quinn Schulte, who's a super senior,
sure,
and former 5-star Xavier Wampa. So just
sure, yeah. But what I would,
Castro, who acts as kind of a hybrid.
Yeah, and my counter, whatever you want to call it, to that. I mean, you're looking at Malik Verdon, Bo Freeler, and Jeremiah Cooper are
All returners.
Fabulous players. Jeremiah Cooper led the nation in interceptions for a good chunk of last season.
Too small to get drafted, but very good player. Very.
Oh, he's a perfect college safety. He's not going to be a high round pick probably, but he is a ball hawk all over the place. And Bo Freeler is an NFL safety for sure. Modi Verdon, same way.
Why didn't he leave? Why didn't Bo leave? If because he was
kind of the same. I think it's kind of the same reason as a lot of Iowa State guys tend to stick around for a little bit longer. I think part of it, they just like playing for Matt Campbell. But the guys like that have had chances to be first round picks, or first, second round picks, Breece Hall, Dave Montgomery, obviously Hakeem didn't, Alan Lazard didn't end up being high picks, but there was a thought that they could be high picks. And TJ Tampa, things like that. Those guys at skill positions where you want to leave early if you can, they have left early. Safety is not one of those I think that people put as much emphasis on as running back, where running backs, as soon as you're ready, you should go as soon as you're ready. Safety, I don't think is treated the same way. If you can stay and get an extra year of really good tape, I think NFL teams appreciate that. Anthony Johnson's a great example. At corner, probably wasn't going to get drafted at corner. Stayed an extra year stayed one more year. They moved him to safety, and he was fabulous. And he got taken by the Packers, and he's had a very good start to his career for the Packers. So I think, especially a defensive back, I think NFL teams would rather see you have another good year of film versus come out when you're just 1 year younger. Mostly because I think especially safeties, but defensive backs in general can play longer than other skill positions. So I think that's part of it. I think he just kind of, frankly, I think he just kind of likes playing names for Matt Campbell.
Linebacker, you've got to give Iowa. I can't imagine.
Yeah, I'll give Iowa a slight lead on the linebacker. No, Iowa's got great linebackers. I like Iowa State's linebacker room. I do for sure. But I'm gonna give the edge to Iowa there.
Are both back, and then they get a nice safety blanket in Kyler Fisher that nobody expected to come back. Now, I will say this. I'm guessing I would probably give the room the edge to Iowa State on the defensive side, not even really knowing that they return. And I'll say that because this is the first time in a while, Mark, that I do have significant questions about Iowa's depth at defensive line. Now, I do think Phil and Kelvin Bell will figure that out. But for the first time, I don't know that I can go past 6 as it relates to like a pecking order. You got Aaron Graves, you got Ethan Herkett, you got Y.A. Black, Jeremiah Pittman comes back, who's played some on the interior. He's likely going to be on that 2 line, and if anybody gets hurt, he'll be thrust to the 1s. And then Max Llewellyn. So they got a couple like those, and they've ran undersized DNs and have been very successful over the course of Phil Parker's tenure at Iowa. You talk about guys like Parker Hesse, guys like Nate Meyer, Joe Evans last year, but those guys are both undersized. I think it was Herkett that made a big play against Iowa State to kind of wrap that game up last year, and Jack Trice. But I just don't know, like, after those guys, Brian Allen Jr. is a guy to look for. He's a big athlete who I could see running inside and out, but he's still young. He's shown flashes, especially I think it was last Kids Day in August that he really flashed. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. Jeff Bowie's finally healthy. Would be great to see him. He's just dealt with a plethora of injuries to come forward, but I just don't know depth-wise for the first time in quite some time what Iowa looks like along that defensive line. That's probably I think without question, the weakness as of right now for that Phil Parker D.
Yeah, for Iowa State, I generally feel pretty good about the defensive line. Dominique Orange was a huge bright spot last year. There was a lot of thought that he would, and I know that he did get some fairly significant SEC offers. Like a lot of people thought that he was going to get poached by an SEC team. But obviously he's still here. Him and J.R. Singleton in the interior, that defensive line are huge. I've heard a lot of good things about Zamir Hawk. He's a redshirt freshman coming in. I've heard a lot about Zamir Hawk. It sounds like he's taking a huge jump forward. I would guess you'll see quite a bit of him next year. Trent Jones came in. I believe he is a transfer he's up from Minnesota. I think they're pretty excited about him. Kenny Eziogu and Tyler Yedem off the edge. Feel very good about them. Kind of another since Iowa State uses the edge linebackers quite a bit in their pass rush, if you're going to talk about pass rush specifically, I think you have to talk about like Caleb Bacon as an edge rush linebacker. He was an outstanding edge last year, or a linebacker coming off the edge, I should say. And having him back is huge. And since Iowa State did get a little bit weaker at corner, or younger for sure, anyways, having a good defensive line that can kind of contain the attack a little bit and put more pressure on the quarterback, I think will be huge, especially early in the season as the young guys at corner kind of get their feet under them. So I feel excellent about Iowa State's defensive line, and the safeties for sure. Feel fantastic about those two positions. Linebacker, it's young but talented. Feel good. Corner, you've got Miles Purchase back. You want to see who steps up on that other one, on that other corner spot. But I know they've got a few guys back there that they really like. Just got to kind of see who steps up.
And then lastly, I know we're running out of time, but special teams wise, you lose Torrey Taylor, has been such a weapon for Iowa, and that's not exaggerating.
He's my fourth Hawkeye that I ever wish was an Iowa State Cyclone.
Yeah, and so you lose him, it's a huge loss. You get Reese Dakin from the same Australian kicking academy. So you bring Reese Dakin in. I think he's going to be really good, but the question marks, we haven't seen him in an actual game. Got a big leg, obviously. And then Drew Stevens, I know he struggled at times last year, but he's really good. And I think he will be the guy. I don't think it'll be, let's see, Ty Nissen's a backup at punter. It would be either the freshman Trip Woody, or who is the other guy? Find the other guy at place kicker. I'm drawing a blank. They just brought in, didn't they just bring in? If Tim Stevens is in the chat, have him, Tim, if you could throw it up there, because I'm drawing a blank. But I think it's Drew Stevens' job, 1,000%. So, and then return duties. Yeah, there's some question marks there. Losing.
So who will be back there to improperly signal for fair catches now for Iowa?
It's such a sad state of affairs being a Cyclone fan. It really is. It's such a sad state of affairs.
But we didn't lose to Minnesota, so that's something.
And neither did Iowa. But anyways,
let's move on.
Wait a minute. Coming from the team and the guy that lost to Ohio University, and
but it's not
Memphis.
Minnesota. Ohio is objectively not Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota is so much better than both of the schools I just mentioned.
But they're not Ohio, but Ohio is not Minnesota. So
no, this is true.
He states facts, Mark. So Tim, thank you.
Facts only here.
So only two kickers, unless they add a walk-on somewhere. I guess that's possible they do that late. And yes, Weegan will return probably punts and kicks. Maybe Max White gets a run at kick return, or maybe you get Caleb Johnson if they feel he's healthy enough to go. He returned kicks a lot last year, but Cooper DeJean obviously being gone hurts, right? It hurts on a number. You got to figure out their gunner. Is it going to be Devin Hilson? Cohen Intringer steps up there. I know that doesn't, gunner doesn't sound real important, but when you talk about how great the punt game is, it's pretty darn important. So I don't know who to, give the nod to on special teams. I would probably give the nod to anybody that's coached by LeVar Woods, because he's been phenomenal in that position.
So all of them?
Well, no, I'm saying as a special teams unit, I'm going to group them all together.
I know, I'm just screwing with you.
I would say Iowa's probably got the better special teams unit, but I can't say that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because like Iowa State's return game has been really poopy for the last few years, but last year was fine. And punter, Tyler Perkins was he's been a very good punter his whole career. I would expect him to continue to be that. Kicking game at Iowa State continues to and will be a nightmare until proven otherwise. And then everything I've heard is that they're gonna try to return stuff more rather than just calling for catches all the time.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean, as long as it's a net zero, whatever. I would say it's actually pretty good on special teams last year. Frankly, as long as they're just not as bad as they were 2022 and earlier, as long as they're not as bad as that was, it's fine. Like as long as they can finish every game with special teams at least being a net zero or better,
yeah,
fine. Whatever.
The hour goes so quickly. every week, but especially with Levi on the line. So there you go. Especially when he is to be corrected about Minnesota's status in college football and JJ McCarthy. But that's
a lot
fine.
of Michigan fans that don't like me that log on each and every week, and they were in your camp for a long time until you made the JJ comments.
I like I said, I was a big like believer in JJ going into the draft. And I think he will be good for the Vikings, especially now that they've got some weapons and stuff like that. But
I was a big believer in Iowa winning this game, not for sure. It's always hotly contested, and I know that Iowa State had a really good team last year, and I expected them to be tough this year. But the more I looked at Iowa State this week, the more I thought, this is basically a toss-up.
We've said that a lot, and normally when we say that, it goes Iowa's direction.
But then in 2022, we both said that I was going to walk away with it, and then here
did I say that? I did not say that. You have
we both did. We can go back and find the video. It's on the internet.
We can, because Iowa was coming off the heels of a 8-7 victory or whatever it was against South Dakota State. I guarantee you, I did not do that.
I mean, this game is always close. It's always stupid. It's always a terrible game to watch, and I don't know. I genuinely like everything that like you will go into the game.
2017 was not terrible to watch. That was played.
2017 was a magnificent football game. I wish they played them more often.
If you like offense,
who doesn't like offense? Points are objectively more fun than no points.
Yeah,
I mean, I've learned to appreciate a very good defensive team, just like you guys have, but if I had to choose between this game being a 44-41 overtime shootout or this being a 13-7 pile of crap, I mean, I'll take 44-41 all the time. Well,
I was going to say, Levi, the statement that you just made basically just completely told the entire Iowa fan base that they're wasting every Saturday afternoon in the fall.
I mean, I feel like that's a common knowledge.
So, Mark, we'll do running backs next week. I've got my list and I've got my honorable mentions. So we'll do that, and
we will make it clear that it is far superior than Iowa State's list over the last 20 years.
That's right.
Joey's stopping by. We appreciate you being here, Joey. Joey is the enemy of excellence. He doesn't want Ohio State to win for some reason. But anyway, whatever that means. So, Levi, thanks for being here. Everybody catch Levi's work at Wide Right Natty Light. That's the SB Nation stop for Iowa State. And you also do a podcast as well.
Oh, we've got a whole podcast network. We've got throughout the year, we got like half a dozen different podcasts covering football, women's and men's basketball, and all that good stuff. And if there's ever a good time to tune in as a neutral observer, 2024-25 is shaping up to probably be the best athletic year in Iowa State sports history. You got a football team that has an outside shot at pushing for a playoff. You've got men's and women's basketball teams that are both Final Four contenders. Men's basketball probably has a legit shot at winning a national championship. Wrestling is probably going to be a top 5 team all year. This is going to be a good year to be a Cyclone.
Very good. Levi, good to see you. We'll probably catch you sometime in September. And maybe I will probably reel you in a little bit before that to set us up for the 24 season in Ames.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Levi. Have a good one, sir. All right, Corey. Another edition in the books. We would like everyone to, of course, check out Corey's work on a regular basis at from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Anything in particular to be looking at for this week?
Yeah, I will continue to get recruited. We've got someone was mentioned earlier in the chat. Iowa's newest receiver, Jacob Gill, out of Northwestern. Had the privilege of speaking with him here the other day, so we'll be publishing that interview. I believe it was Tim said earlier in the chat he expects him to start, so that would be great. That would mean that he's exceeded some people's expectations. I have higher expectations for that young man than other people. He's got a really good head on his shoulders. Like, you play at Northwestern, you probably have to take yourself seriously, at least here and there, right? And that's the indication. I found out he is rooming with Sully, as they call him, Brendan Sullivan. So that bond will continue. And so we'll have that here in the next couple of days.
Folks, we have 2 special editions related to Big Ten football this week. So on Wednesday at 8 Eastern on the national channel, Ohio State, Michigan deep dive. I'm not going to explain what that means, but if you've been around for these deep dives, We're going to do one later with Iowa, Ohio State, and Michigan. Believe me, the chat will be on fire comparing these two. It's a historic deal. It's from all angles. So again, check that out. Tony Altamore comes in with all the metrics. Ohio State versus Michigan. So it should be something else. Always is. And then on Friday, Tony is going to break down the 4 newbies to the Big Ten: USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon, what they bring historically. And we're talking athletic budgets, student rates. We're talking the entire culture of these programs coming into the Big Ten and how they stack up against the rest of the conference. So 2 great discussions coming up featuring the Big Ten this week at the Voice of College Football, both of those on the national channel. Corey, appreciate you doing this. 150 in the books. Couldn't do it without you. Appreciate you being here. Have a great night.
Thanks, Mark.